Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Donald Trump has sent Steve Witkoff to meet with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. But did he really meet the real Putin? I wouldn't be so sure. At least if you compare these pictures that are a couple days apart, it definitely doesn't look so. But more importantly, Trump is threatening additional sanctions and tariffs on India for purchasing Russian oil. Could this be the big break? Well, let's find out this and what else Ukraine has uncovered that can potentially threaten Russian dominance in the world. We're going to find about this today. Welcome to Ukraine Daily News. Let's start. So despite me trying to really underscore just how little it matters the Trump's administration on trying to talk some sense into Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump is not giving up on his dream scenario where Putin suddenly comes to his senses. But it is still being covered by mass media and it's still being propagated in all of the news. Therefore, on the news show, I just am forced to talk about this. But Donald Trump sent his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to talk with President Putin, where they discussed things which we don't know about for 3 hours, after which Trump came in with the big statements that there was a great progress made in the talks. However, no further details were shared. I will be looking for tomorrow what it will be, but I will not hold my breath. Most likely this has something to do with the recent propositions of Russians that there should be potentially some kind of a air truce. Now, Russia has been suffering heavily. One thing that they were not planning when they started their war in Ukraine is that Ukrainians will grow their capabilities for long-range strikes. Russia was not expecting that suddenly their big territory is going to become a big downside for their air defense, as Ukraine is going to start pummeling all of their strategic assets. Therefore, we are now reaching the stage in the war in which Russia is openly recognizing that they cannot defend all of their strategic objectives and that Ukrainian air raid campaign is actually hurting Russia very, very much. But the potentially important outcome of the Trump-Witkoff-Putin interaction is obviously what the Trump's administration and Trump himself will be doing with India. India is the largest buyer of the Russian oil, and we're going to talk about the numbers just a little bit later. But more importantly, Trump now has threatened India with additional tariffs. The 25% tariff that Trump has already threatened India should be coming into force this Thursday. However, in the meantime, Trump has threatened India with an additional 25% tariff where if India will not stop buying the Russian oil, and this should come in force in 21 days. But the problematic issue for Trump's administration is, well, memes. Taco memes. The Trump always chickens out memes. But more specifically and seriously, is the way that Trump's administration has been interacting with their counterparts in the world during the initial tariffs outlined by the Trump's administration, and how he was backing down when he met some forced pushback and stiffness in interactions with the counterparts. It is my assumption, and to be honest, not only mine, that India has learned from this, and so far the modus operandi that they've chosen to go for is to be firm and stating that no one is going to scare India into submission. And as a statement here by the Ministry of External Affairs of India, I quote, "The United States has in recent days targeted India's oil imports from Russia. We have already made clear our position on these issues, including the fact that our imports are based on market factors and done with the overall objective of ensuring the energy security of 1.4 billion people in India. It is therefore extremely unfortunate that the US should choose to impose additional tariffs on India for actions that several other countries are also taking in their own national interest. We reiterate that these actions are unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. India will take all actions necessary to protect its national interest." Overall, it is a pretty vague statement that allows India to do basically anything and just expressing their frustration, but so far, India has rejected any kind of threat of Trump putting additional tariffs and have not ordered their purchases of Russian oil to reduce any business activities with Russia. And the answer why this is happening, in my perspective, is very simple. Money. It just pays really well to buy cheap Russian oil. More specifically, India has increased their purchases of Russian oil from $2.31 billion purchases in 2021 to now totaling $52.2 billion in 2024. That is a massive increase. And as I mentioned before in yesterday's video, is that Europeans are also buying the same Russian oil after it was refined by India as oil products coming from India, despite the fact that they're made from the Russian crude oil. India is making a pretty substantial buck from selling the oil products back to Europe. Despite the fact that there should be a lot of praise going to Europe for reducing their dependence on Russian energy systems, they have reduced their purchases almost 3 times, which is an insane amount within just a couple of years to do. This is the type of losses that a lot of analysts don't talk about, just how much money the European Union has actually lost. Some estimate that the total cost of shifting away from the Russian oil sources is now estimated to be around 800 billion euros, which is a massive implied loss for the European Union. But nonetheless, there's still a lot of Russian oil coming into Europe. Over 1.48 billions in Russian oil is still making its way to Europe. But more importantly, the Russian natural gas. 17% of European natural gas still comes from Russia. It's massive amounts, and massive amounts of money is being paid to Russia. European Union is paying more money for the Russian natural resources to Russia than they are sending in their help to Ukraine. So while I'll acknowledge that what Europe did is unprecedented and the implied costs are staggering, I will not stop repeating that we need to get off of this dictatorial drug that is threatening the safety and prosperity of every single citizen of the European Union, and most importantly, the citizens of Ukraine. After Steve Witkoff reported back to Donald Trump, President Zelenskyy also called Donald Trump to talk about what has been discussed and what are their positions. President Zelenskyy, as always, underscored to Donald Trump that the Ukrainians are wanting one thing and one thing only, peace, and they're ready for some kind of a ceasefire. In addition, after the call with President Trump, President Zelenskyy called in his European allies where they agreed on the common next steps. As you might expect, I would be heavily criticizing the European leaders for not taking a firmer stance and not having an individual, clear European position. But I cannot do it at this state because, as I have been explaining many times before, Europeans decided to, instead of creating their own European position, to 100% fall behind Zelenskyy, and Zelenskyy has been interacting very closely with the European leaders since then, and he's trying to basically project the common stance of Europe. Europeans speaking in one voice, especially in the time of need. I believe this is fantastic. In other news, President Zelenskyy reiterated that the drone mega deal with the United States is already being finalized and it's soon to be proposed. Ukraine has achieved monumental success on their drone production technology, and they will be sharing that experience with the United States as a potential to sway the Trump administration and get the ability for the Europeans to buy more US weapons. Because yesterday I reported that it was Netherlands that was buying weapons from the United States in the total sum of $500 million, but also it was Denmark, Sweden, and Norway that are buying US weapons for $500 million as well, totaling over $1 billion of weapons that will be supplied from United States to Ukraine. But now we know for certain that this is the new type of program that has been opened by the United States called PEARL, Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List, which is a fantastic program when you start thinking about the situation Ukraine is finding themselves in. We know that in general, European states have definitely stepped up to support Ukraine in their efforts. They have been providing more funds, they have been funding a lot of the production inside Ukraine, but there are certain types of weapons and equipment that Europeans just cannot provide. So this program, the PEARL, allows Ukraine to outline what kind of weapons, systems, and components they would like to receive. Then Europeans can look at the list of what Ukraine wants, and then, if those are American ones, and then they can come to United States with that list selected and receive specifically the things that Ukraine outlines as needed. So it's not that the countries decide what they will be sending to Ukraine, it's rather a program that allows Ukraine sort of to do pool of specifically the things that it needs right now. And given the situation that I've described already in length about the relationship between Ukraine, Europe, and US, then this outcome of Ukraine getting exactly the things it needs from the United States is actually pretty good. Just recently we heard about tsunami damaging some of the Russian submarines in the far east of Russia, as now the Ukrainian intelligence is reporting that they've achieved something amazing. They were able to acquire the intelligence on the newest Russian nuclear submarine, VOLIA A. This newest submarine is supposed to be the main part of the Russian nuclear triad going forward. And now, thanks to Ukrainian intelligence, all of the Russian adversaries have access to full overview of what this submarine consists of, how it operates, how it's being tested, which radio and other frequencies it's using, and what can be expected from it. This obviously allows for any and all countermeasures to be developed as required, and more specifically, it outlines for everyone all of the technical limitation and vulnerabilities of this Knyaz Pozharsky project, VOLIA A submarine. Then there is news that made me very happy. The commander-in-chief of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, came out with a statement that Ukrainian mobilization efforts must be continued and should be strengthened going forward. This is due to efforts of Russia of increasing their military personnel. They've already added 2 more divisions to the number of their forces in Ukraine, despite the losses that Ukraine is inflicting on the Russians. Syrsky explained that, in essence, to match Russia in this effort, Ukraine needs to strengthen their mobilization drive as well. Quote, "We understand the situation and know what must be done. Our opponent will increase pressure. Our common task is to prevent them from achieving their objectives. We will achieve the task." And I think this is great. Why? Because while there is problems in the Ukrainian military, which I talked about in my lengthy video some time ago, just watch it. But more importantly, Ukrainian society, the civil society specifically, has lived for a while like with their head in the sand. There needs to be a very frank and honest conversation within the Ukrainian society of what does it mean to stand against Russia, to stand up to Russia. And that it's not only the people that are already in the front lines that need to take the brunt of the force, that more proper conversation on the mobilization effort must be had. A very worrisome new tactic has been uncovered in Ukraine. One of the shut down Shahed drones turned out to be carrying a couple of the anti-tank mines made by Russia. The issue being that these anti-tank mines can be spread by Shahed drones all over the territory of Ukraine. And these anti-tank mines, their casing is in plastic. There is no technology available in the world to detect these mines. They are undetectable. Plastic casing mines is the bane of demining operations everywhere. And the worst part is that these mines, scattered all across Ukrainian highways, all across Ukraine, could pose a real serious terroristic threat against the Ukrainian population. Russia is being a terrorist state once again, doing a completely inhumane activity by just mining the civilian areas all across Ukraine. So, and to finish on a high note, we were talking in this episode a lot about the Russian oil, and while it is important to talk about the quantities of salt oil and prevent India from buying more Russian oil, it is important to underscore that in general, Russia still is not getting the profits that it was hoping to get from those oil sales, mostly because of the fact that the current oil market is very rough for Russia. There is a lot of oil on the market, there is a general slowdown in the world economy, And all of these pressures are pushing down the oil prices. More importantly, the Russian ruble is a little bit too strong for Russian liking, and they're not getting the money that they would hope they want to get. So this creates a big issue for Russia that despite selling whatever they could to Europe, selling pretty big amounts to India, in general, oil and gas revenues for Russia are plummeting for the third month straight. And this is not going to be looking good for Russian budget. We're going to find out in September how are they going to looking back at the next year's budget. I'm predicting a bloodbath. Thank you today for watching. I'm Georgie. I love you. Slava Ukraini. And I will see you next time.